And if you have any questions about the topic we're on, put your hand up. I'll try and keep my eye on the cameras and try and hop in and allow people to have some input, have a bit of a discussion along with the presented material. So yeah, Ted, take it away.
Yeah, good morning. It's great to see all of you. Welcome to the virtual booth here. Excited to spend a few minutes, an hour here with all of you today. So, as Owen mentioned, we do have a few, I think 8 different slides to go through. We're going to talk a little bit about new product that we're introducing this year. Even though it is a presentation, we've got slides. We'll keep it pretty informal. So if you have questions along the way, go ahead and feel free to raise your hand. I believe there's a chat function too that Owen's keeping track of. So if you'd rather chat your question to Owen, he can ask that as well. So I think unless there's anything else we need to take care of right now, I think we can go ahead and jump into a new product for 2021 for Walker Mowers. So Tim's gonna share screen here. So you can see the slides. We're going to start off talking about a new deck called the DU48-3. This is a belt-driven convertible deck. It's really a two-function deck, either mulch or it's not necessarily mulch. It's either side discharge or collection. You could technically mulch with it. That would be a third function, but I can talk about it a little bit in a minute. It's a little bit of a compromised mulching deck, but it's a fantastic collection deck and a very good side discharge deck. A little bit of background on this deck. We've been trying to do a belt-driven collection deck for a long time. I mean, we have a stack of discarded prototype belt drive collection decks over in our machine shed that's probably 8 or 10 decks deep. So it's been a concept, an idea that has been floating around in our minds for a long time. And really, this goes back to probably far before I was actually back here in the last 10 years. So something we've been working on for a long time, and it's not been easy. When you look at this deck now, you're seeing the bottom of it up on the screen. It's pretty simple. And when we look at it, it's simple enough that we're trying to figure out why it took us so long to figure out. But our gear-driven decks have counter-rotating blades. Both blades rotate towards each other, either at the front of the deck or the back of the deck, depending on if it's a standard rotation or a reverse rotation in our nomenclature. This is the first collection deck we've done where the blades rotate the same direction, similar to a side discharge deck, which is what allows it to be a convertible deck. So as you're looking at it, both blades rotate counterclockwise. Sorry, my screen is backwards from what you're seeing. Away from or towards the discharge end of the deck. So on the right-hand side there, you see the side discharge configuration. On the left-hand side, you can see the collection configuration. And you convert between configurations by actually unbolting the end cap on the deck and swapping it out from either a closed end cap or the side discharge end cap, which includes the deflector shield. We looked at different ways of doing the conversion. There would be probably quicker ways to do it, but we really, from the beginning of this, wanted to make a fairly uncompromised collection deck. And part of that means having the deck skirt follow the radius of the blade. And you can't really do that if you have a really quickly convertible side discharge capable end cap where it really needs to be flat along that right hand trimming area of the deck skirt. So because we wanted a really great collection deck, we decided to do interchangeable end caps. It's 5 bolts. It's still really quick. So 5 1/4-inch bolts. It does take a wrench. You only need one because all of them are carriage head bolts that can't rotate. So you only need to be able to install the nut. You can do it with a wrench. It's quicker if you have a small battery powered impact. But I think if you watched Walker Live, you saw me actually do this in real time, it took about 5 minutes to swap over. So not something you probably want to do from property to property, but day to day, it's not a big deal. So this is a wonderful collection deck. It cuts and collects like a Walker deck should. We're proud of the cut quality and the collection quality of this deck. It's a little bit different stripe, a little bit different appearance, but it's very good. And then the beautiful thing about this deck is that if you want to do spring or fall leaf cleanup, but maybe the grass starts slowing down, through the middle cutting months, and you don't need to collect necessarily, you can side discharge through those months and save yourself some time. So we're really excited about this. This deck has been shipping for a few months now. We've got some out there. People are liking the performance of it. I mentioned earlier that you could potentially mulch with it. It's not a great mulching deck because it has the full perimeter cap edge on it, which is necessary for the collection function. That full perimeter cap edge prevents material from exiting the deck in a mulch mode. It uses the same length of blades as our 48-inch Model R deck, which we do have mulch blades available for. So in the right conditions, you could do it if it's dry. If you're cutting off very much or there's much moisture in the grass, it's not going to be a great mulch deck. So we want to be realistic about the expectations from that standpoint. But from a collection and side discharge standpoint, it's a great deck.
Hey, Ted, I'll just jump in. I see Scott's got his hand up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, I didn't have a question. I just got the kids running around. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Myself. Ted, I was just curious, when you're in side discharge mode, then do you have to block the fan intake?
Yes. I forgot to mention that. So there, to convert between the two, you change the end cap, and then there is a small block off baffle that does cover the discharge path, which you can't really see here on the right hand blade, the bottom blade, kind of just adjacent to where the blade is oriented in that picture is an opening. It's covered by that V-shaped plate on the bottom. You can see where the discharge chute would attach to the back of the deck, but the flow exits tangentially off that back blade, and then turns a corner and goes into the plastic chute that goes from the deck back to the blower. And there, you can't see it, but it's not just a sharp corner. It radiuses around, and there also is a little deflector vane in there as well to help the material change direction. So, did that answer your question? Was that Scott? I couldn't quite see. Okay.
Yeah, it was Scott Morrison from Pro.
Yeah, that answered it, Ted.
Good to see you, Scott.
Good to see you too.
The belt drive on top uses a micro V belt similar to most of our other belt-driven decks outside of the recent Model R deck, and I guess the 52 and 62 use a V belt. But this is a micro V belt. The tensioner arrangement is similar to how we do the Model H decks. If you're familiar with those, it's a linear tensioner with a gas spring damper on it. We've continued to evolve that design, and at this point, it's adjustment free. The gas spring makes the belt run very smooth, and also in the braking mode, it absorbs that initial braking pulse without needing like a limiting jack screw like we've had on our linear tensioners in the past. So really no user adjustment required for the belt tensioning system any longer, and the gas spring really makes it run nice. You'll see later on when we talk about the DS48-3, a new side discharge deck. We're using a very similar belt arrangement on it as well. So we like the micro V belts. It lets us do what we need to from a routing standpoint while keeping everything very compact since it's right underneath your feet. Actually, the belt cover is the footrest. So, any other questions on the DU48? This has been a big project for us. We're really excited to have it released and out there, and we think it's going to do some good work. If not, let's move on to the DS56. The DS56 has been available for a little while now. I think we actually went into production with this last fall. This is a redesign of the 56 that we've had available for quite a few years now that replaced the 54 quite a number of years ago. So the DS56 has been a good deck. Occasionally we've had some cut quality issues on the left-hand corner of the deck, and the other knock against it would just be maybe some durability issues and really rough usage. And so we went to work to address those. The primary things we've done, we've added some baffling that you can see there on the, I guess that'd be your right hand end of the deck. It's actually the operator's left-hand side, opposite the discharge end. We've added a baffle and a pan in there to clean up that side. And we've also moved the left-hand caster wheel. You can see it in the picture a little bit. The carrier frame coming up to the left-hand caster actually jogs in towards the center line of the tractor. The right-hand caster you can see is a little bit outside of that right-hand deck spindle or the gearbox output shaft. On the left-hand side, the caster is more in line with the deck spindle, and so it gets the caster track, which tends to lay the grass down. It gets that into a better part of the deck to be lifted back up and cut cleanly. So a little bit of, as far as the left-hand edge of the deck goes, on the very edge of the deck, we've added some baffling to clean that up, and then a little bit further in, we've improved the cut quality there on the caster track. We've also added a replaceable deck edge to the left-hand side there. Can't really see it in the picture, but it's the same type of replaceable deck edge that we're using on other 48-inch collection decks primarily at this point, but we're adding them as we can. It attaches using four socket head cap screws with little flush nuts on the inside of the deck, but it allows you to replace that part of the deck which oftentimes rides up over curbs or sidewalks and wears. So once it wears down, you can flip it over. So it's got two wear edges, and then once you've flipped it and both sides are worn, then it's easily replaceable, and it's very inexpensive. So that's a good thing. We've added a cap edge across the full front width of the deck. You can see there, almost the full front. That reinforces the front edge. And then we've also, instead of just the flat hot rolled bar reinforcement along the front edge of the deck, we've gone to a round bar. It's a 5/8 steel bar, which we use on a lot of our other decks as well for front edge reinforcement. So we've added some structure across the front of the deck to really beef that up as well. So, and then the last thing I'd mention is the rubber discharge chute. So more damage resistant. Those things tend to get torn up. So the rubber discharge chute's a good thing. And then I said one more thing. I actually meant two more things. The last thing I'll mention is that this deck now has flat blades on it. So instead of our offset blades, which are formed with a channel in the middle, this is a flat blade, clear across the length of the blade. To get the cutting height correct, we're using a blade spacer that bolts to the hub as the blade normally would. So there's a spacer that bolts to the hub, and then there's a special T-shaped nut then that retains the spacer and the blade to the gearbox output shaft. So again, it's with an eye towards cut quality. The nice thing about the flat blade is that we can have a longer sharpened cutting edge. It basically can go clear to the hub of the blade now. So we're giving the blade more chances to cut a given piece of grass. And on this particular deck, the difference in airflow that we can get with the flat blade seems to be beneficial. So we also do have the flat blade kit as an upgrade kit that you could buy for prior model DS56s. These blades can be run on older decks. And actually, we could run this blade in Spacer on the DS74 as well, since it's the same length of blade. Any questions on the DS56? Kind of went fast through that, but quite a few things changed, and they all add up to a nice overall improvement in cut quality. All right. If you have a question on that
Actually,
later, just,
I did
yeah.
have a quick question.
Yeah,
The change on the idler wheel on the front. I don't know. You probably even touched on it, but just to refresh, what were the benefits that doing that did?
So on the DS56, the prior model, the carrier frame arm that locates that left-hand caster wheel came straight off the deck. The width of that is really set by the width of the gearboxes, because the arm has to be outside of the gearbox. And it was really too wide. If you look at where that wheel would end up in the cutting arc of the blade, the caster wheel was in an area where the blade is moving forward more than it's moving sideways. When the caster rolls over grass, it tends to lay the grass over in the forward direction. And so when that grass gets laid over in the same direction that the blade is moving, the blade doesn't really want to lift it up. The airflow is really just trying to keep the grass laid down rather than lifting that grass up so that it can be cut cleanly. So by moving the left-hand caster more towards the center line, now instead of that being in a part of the blade arc where the blade is moving forward in the same direction that the grass has been laid over, now that blade is moving across that grass from side to side, and it lifts that grass up more cleanly to be cut. So there were certain conditions where you would end up with just kind of a stripe of grass that wasn't being cut cleanly right in line with that caster track. And you'll see mid mounts do the same thing. You'll see most mid mounts don't have their front deck casters symmetrically located relative to like the drive tires or even the cutting width of the deck. Usually that left-hand caster is going to be offset in towards the center line of the tractor, and it's for the same reason. Mid mounts have even more weight on their front casters than we do. So it's kind of a common thing you'll see. We've done it on this deck. We've also couldn't really see it on the DU48-3 that we talked about first, but we did the same thing on it, jogging the left-hand caster in towards the center line of the tractor. So yeah, there you can see the angled deck caster, and it's on the right side of the picture, but that's the operator's left. Does that make sense, Owen?
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because yeah, like seeing it when I first saw it, I was like, that's great, just because you can get more cutting under a fence, or you can kind of get in closer to things. So I assumed that was maybe part of it, but then yeah, hearing the actual explanation is that's very interesting.
Deck caster location side to side is it's kind of a balancing act. It's nice to move it in from a trimming standpoint, but the further you move it in, the more potential for scalping you can get on the end of the deck. And so we've tried a number of different locations side to side, and this is the one we like the best. We really didn't want to add additional scalp wheels to this deck, because scalp wheels definitely impact your trimming capability. So we've kept the end of this deck nice and clean. You can trim with the side clear around the back of the back corner of the deck. So ideally maybe the caster would be in even further from a cutting quality standpoint, but then you really would need scalp wheels out there. So anyway, we think we got the right spot. So
nice. Yeah, no, it's good to see. I owned a previous generation DS56, and I love that thing so much. So seeing the improvement, I was kind of like, what are you going to do to improve it? But seeing all the improvements, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it was really cutting condition dependent whether or not the cut quality on that left hand edge was an issue or not. There were lots of people that had no complaints whatsoever, but there were some conditions where it was an issue. So we think we've cleaned that up.
Nice. Thanks.
All right. Well, we should keep moving. It's 9:22 already. So let's talk next about the DS48-3. So to talk about this deck, we really need to talk about the Model R. The Model R has been out for a little over a year now. And sometimes, well, I would say you get lucky. I don't, when it comes to Dean designing decks, it's not luck. It's years and years of experience and, a natural eye for deck design that's been refined over thousands of trials and errors. So, but all that to say, the DS48-3 is an evolution of the 48-inch deck that we developed for the Model R, which has been a spectacular deck right out the chute. Got it right the first time around, and it's if you haven't mowed with a Model R with the 48-inch deck, it's a great cutting deck. Because it's so good, we wanted to have that capability for our other machines, and so we basically took the geometry of the Model R's 48-inch deck and built a carrier frame for it and a different belt drive system so that it could go on our other machines. So basically all of our other machines except for Model H's, but normal deck compatibility for this would be Model B's and then all of our collection machines. Similar, like I said, geometry-wise to the Model R deck, the belt drive is totally different because we're still driving it with a PTO shaft rather than a belt from the tractor. And so it shares a belt drive layout using a micro V belt and our linear belt tensioner, similar to the DU48 that we talked about earlier. Although the spindles are reversed. On the DU48, the left-hand spindle is back, the right-hand spindle is forward. On this deck, the left-hand spindle is forward, the right-hand spindle is back. So the belt routing is different, but many of the components are similar. We use the same spindles that we're using on the Model R as well, and the same blade. So more similarities from the housing standpoint than differences. The difference is really in the carrier frame and the belt drive system. So really, this deck, while it's an awesome deck on the front of a Model B, and then being belt driven rather than gear driven is beneficial if you're doing rough mowing where there's potential to damage gearboxes if you hit something. The belt drive is very robust and forgiving, and it's also very quiet. So some nice advantages from a durability and noise level, and really cuts every bit as good as any of our side discharge decks. So we think that for a Model B side discharge scenario that this is really going to be a go-to combination in the future. We're also, we will have mulch baffles available for this. It'll be the same mulch baffle kit that I mentioned. I don't know if I mentioned it. We're updating the Model R mulch baffles to be quick change, and so this will incorporate the new style mulch baffle, which will be compatible with this deck and the Model R48. Yeah, pretty straightforward as far as the deck goes, but it's going to be a really nice addition to our lineup. Any questions on that? If not, we should move on to the next thing, which is a 54-inch deck for the Model R. So the Model R, as I said earlier, has been out for a little over a year now and has had a great release. It's doing a good job out there for quite a few people. We've sold a few thousand of these so far. So to this point, it's been limited to a 42 or 48-inch option. And for a lot of people, that will suffice. There are quite a few people. if you're interested in a machine of this price point, you might have a bigger lot and want a deck bigger than 48 inches. And so we wanted to get up into the mid 50-inch cut range. This is a 54-inch deck. You can see that it's a 3-bladed deck rather than 2 blades now. The 3-bladed deck is great because those blades are nice and short, and it creates a very compact deck front to back. It's actually a little bit shorter even front to back wise than the 42-inch deck. So it's wider, but actually quite a bit shorter, which is great for lots of reasons. Cut quality wise, it's a great deck. The 3 blades, the 3-blade arrangement runs really nice and smooth. It was a little bit of a challenge because we're still running this deck with a single belt from the tractor. So there's only one PTO drive belt. There's 2 belts on this machine, one for the ground drive that drives the transmissions, and then a second belt that comes off of the electric clutch on the motor up through the chassis, through a series of idlers to the deck, and then back. A little bit of background on the Model R. That was one of our goals, was to be able to drive the deck with the single belt, which is a real challenge when you have an independently mounted cutting deck that can articulate relative to the tractor up and down and torsionally. And so we came up with what I think is a pretty neat solution for that, and it works for the 54 as well. One difference with the 54 is that rather than having the deck belt tensioner on the deck itself, we've moved that tensioner back onto the tractor. We just simply didn't have room on the deck because of the addition of the third spindle to do the tensioner on the deck, and so we had to come up with something different. It's really operationally totally transparent. You can't tell that it's on the tractor rather than the deck, but it was something that we had to do to accommodate this deck. The tractor, as it ships from the factory, will be the same. If you elect to put a 54-inch deck on a Model R to pair it up that way, it will be a few minutes of additional assembly time because you'll have to do a little bit of reconfiguration of the idlers that are located on the tractor to actually install the tensioning idler. So not a big deal, but a little difference that I thought I'd mention. Any questions about the DS54-R? It's a bigger deck, but the Model R still maneuvers it very well. It's still, you can tell it's slightly heavier, but from an agility standpoint, it's still a very fun to drive machine. So basically no compromise in that regard. Good. So I would mention that we're just starting the tooling phase of this deck, and so availability of this is going to be probably second quarter of this year probably late spring. We could step back to, I wasn't talking about availability as we went, but the DU48 that we talked about first, the belt drive convertible deck, is available now. We've been in full production of that for a few months now. The DS56 is also available now. We've been in production for that, as well for a few months. The DS48-3 we just finished tooling on. We'll begin full production of that here probably in the next month, but it's going to take a little while to get out into the channel. And then the DS54, we're still working on tooling for, so that one's going to be a little bit delayed compared to the others, but it'll be worth the wait. So, all right, any questions? Those are the 4 decks that we had to talk about. So any deck questions before we move on to some different tractors and other things? Okay, no hands are raised, Owen?
No, I think you covered everything pretty good.
Okay, beat it up pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our 5th slide, talk about the new Model B a little bit. So the B27i we released last fall. And so it's been out for a full cutting season now, at least North America wise. So it's not necessarily a new product, but it's new enough that I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking about it, and then it's a good segue into the new B23 as well. So the Model B historically has been a great machine. That was something we introduced in 2005, and it evolved really from what we intended back then was to be an entry-level machine into the Walker lineup. It really evolved over time into a full-fledged, commercial non-collection machine, and was going out and doing a ton of great work, for commercial cutters every day in and day out. So, with the evolution of the Model B, we kind of came to the point where we felt like it was time to do a little bit of a refresh on it. And so a couple of years ago, we went to work on that. We wanted to simplify the machine as much as possible. We wanted to try to take some cost out of it if possible, without compromising all of the good attributes of the Model B, which is, it's very compact, it's agile, high ground speed, very high productivity. So the big difference between the B27i and prior Model Bs is really the electric clutch. It has an Ogura electric clutch in it, which really simplifies the middle of the machine quite a bit, reduces the component count a lot, and using a very reliable, proven electric clutch. So that's been a good thing so far. I don't know if you can tell from the picture, but we've changed the way the chassis and the front body are laid out. Rather than the fenders for the drive tires being part of the front body, they're actually now part of the chassis. And what used to be the front body is more now of just a seat pan. It still does tilt forward. The deck counterweight springs are still attached to it, and that's how you detension them as we've always done. But the front body has really been minimized. One of the nice things about that is that now the forward speed control lever is actually attached to the chassis instead of the front body. It simplifies the linkage between the forward speed control and the steering shaft mechanism, and it also provides a much more solid interface. And because the forward speed control friction adjustment is now directly on the lever, it really solidifies the feel of the forward speed control. It's a little thing, but it's a nice ergonomic change for the operator. We've changed the way that the rear body attaches to the machine. Rather than it being a part of the front body and lifting up with the front body, it's now a separate part that hinges at the back. So it's a little bit of I don't know if it's simpler. The old body was pretty simple, but it makes the front body, it allows us to make the front body quite a bit simpler, and it really gives you great access to the back of the machine. This machine has improved guarding around the muffler. So from a hot surfaces protection standpoint, the old Model B muffler was a little bit exposed, and this is fully guarded. It's compliant with European heat hot surface regulations, as well as the upcoming changes to the ANSI regulations, which we try to be compliant with here for our North American market. Yeah, am I missing anything? I think those are kind of the high points of the Model B. Transmissions are the same. The overall layout of the machine is similar, but as far as the chassis goes, it was a fairly clean sheet redesign. Yeah, so that's the B27i. We've continued to make the B18 and the B19 in parallel with the B27i. The B18 and the B19 still had the older style chassis, and really continued on unchanged for the last year. We have officially, I think, run out of the engines for the B18 and the B19, so we're not making any more of those. Our intent is to replace the B18 and the B19 with the new Model B23. So the B23 is shown there on the left, and from the picture, it looks pretty much the same as the B27i, because from a parts standpoint, there's a high level of commonality. The B23 is going to be powered by a carbureted Kohler Command Pro, a CH680, so 23 horsepower, but carbureted instead of fuel injected. So the B23 is intended to be a less expensive entry point into the Model B family, and we're getting to that lower price point primarily by going to a carbureted engine. Some people actually prefer carburetors for a number of different reasons. There's nothing wrong with carburetors. The primary disadvantage is going to be higher fuel consumption over time, but carburetors are proven. People know them, know how to work on them, and so we think a carbureted option is appropriate. At this point, I think price point wise, the B23 should be very close to where the outgoing B18 was. So compared to the B18, you're getting a ton more value, 5 more horsepower, but even beyond just horsepower, you're getting quite a bit more displacement, so more usable torque. It's definitely a more powerful machine. This machine will have the quick disconnect PTO shaft, where the old B18 had a fixed PTO shaft. So if you were doing deck changes, that's a little bit of increased inconvenience with the B18. Again, you'll have that on the B23. Really, externally, the big giveaway between a 23 and a 27i is just going to be the addition of a choke lever on the left-hand side of the chassis. Otherwise, they're very, very similar. So from a customer standpoint, choosing between a B23 and a B27i, to me, is really just going to be mostly a matter of economics. Do you want to pay a little more upfront but have the increased fuel economy over time? Do you want to pay less upfront but have a little bit higher operating cost and a little bit less horsepower? But really, the 23 is plenty of power to run almost all of our decks. If you're going out and just hammering with a big deck and wet, long cutting conditions, you probably want the 27i. But for 52-inch or smaller decks, the 23 is going to be plenty for almost every situation. So the new chassis design too has a little bit different geometry for the rear axle pivot. We've lowered the axle pivot. It reduces the tail wheel shimmy that can happen on concrete, especially. So that's another advantage or improvement that we've made too with the new chassis. Both of these machines will have the larger 4.7 gallon gas tank standard as well. That's another advantage the B23 has over the B18 or the B19, which had the smaller 4 gallon tank. All right, I think covered those sufficiently. Any questions on the new Model Bs? We'll talk. The next couple points actually are related to Model Bs, but as far as the tractors themselves go, are there any questions? All right. If not, we can move on to something that I think is kind of cool. This is actually shown on an older B23 because it is compatible with the prior generation of Model Bs, but this is what we're calling the big tire kit. So if you were someone that wishes that you could cut up to 5 inches with the Model B, or if you're wishing that you could go about 10% faster and get between 9 and 10 miles an hour of ground speed rather than between 8 and 9, then the big tire kit might be a great option for you. This puts a 20-inch drive tire onto a Model B instead of the 18-inch drive tire, which is standard on the Model B and most of our other machines outside of the Model H. The 20-inch drive tire raises the machine up about 1 inch, and so to accommodate that, the big tire kit comes with lengthened deck and tail wheel caster forks. So you can, if you look closely at the deck caster forks in this photo, you'll notice that the shaft exiting out the bottom of the caster bearing housing is a little bit longer. It's 1 inch longer. So the caster forks accommodate the taller drive tires and keep the deck level and the tractor level. So So the kit comes with 2 drive tires, and there's actually 2 different versions of the kit depending on which deck type you're running. So if you're running a deck like is shown here with the 8-inch deck casters, you would buy one version of the kit that has the 8-inch caster forks for the deck. There's also another version of the kit that has caster forks for 11-inch deck casters, which would be if you're running a DS52, a DS62, or a DS74, you would get the larger forked version of the kit. And those forks are actually common with what's on the tail of the Model B. So that kit would come with the 2 drive tires and 4 of the same 11-inch fork.
Yeah,
Currently,
Scott, I see Scott has a question here. Scott Morrison.
yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted. I'm just a wee bit slow. I did have one question about the B23. So I'm assuming that configured the way it is, you could still put a utility bed kit on it?
As far as related to the big tire kit or just the B20?
No, sorry, just the B23 not as it is there, but as it will be.
I did not talk about that, but thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, Tim, can you go back a slide? So one of the nice things about the rear body arrangement on the new Model B is that it lends itself very easily to replacing the rear body with the utility bed, and it's one of the reasons we did that. We wanted to have the structure at the back of the machine for a utility bed, and so we decided to make the rear body pivot in much the same way. So to answer your question, yes, we have that available now. It's I believe a factory available option, and definitely something that would be dealer installable as well. At the very back corner of the machine is the pivot point for the rear body or the utility bed. So installing a utility bed is really a simple matter of disconnecting the gas spring that holds the bed or the body open, and then removing the 2 pivot bolts. So swapping from one to the other is extremely simple because the rear mount structure is already there. In contrast with the B23, where putting utility bed on it meant adding a fairly complex structure to get that pivot point where it needed to be for the utility bed. So yeah, that's something that's already available, Scott.
So, but you probably would you be able to order it as a 23 IU?
So with
Grammer seat, or
I'm not sure exactly what our factory configurable options are. I think we have an option for on the B27, and Tim and Daniel, correct me if I'm going way off the rails here, but I think we have a factory option for the B27i, which has the Grammer seat and the utility bed. It's kind of like the B27i premium configuration. And that would be how, Scott, you as the distributor, would order it. But I believe that is available.
okay.
And
I think with the early B27Is, we weren't able to switch and put a Grammer seat on a regular 27i. I think we probably can do that now, though. It was an issue with there was no way to disconnect the seat switch.
So yeah, I think very early on we hadn't worked out the suspension seat wiring yet. So, but we took care of that fairly quickly. We've added if you put a suspension seat on a Model B, the wiring harness for the operator presence switch routes down through a rectangular slot that we've added on the right-hand side of the body, kind of adjacent to the forward speed control lever. So yeah, all that's been worked out. And we've got there is an upgrade, a suspension seat kit available for the Model B, but I believe it's also a factory available option as well. You could order it that way from us.
Okay, good, thanks.
And you can see in these pictures that the standard seat is what we call our newer comfort seat, rather than the steel formed pan seat, which was standard on the B23, or sorry, the B18 and the B19. So yeah, you get a nicer seat standard as well, but the suspension seat also is available as an option. And I suspect we'll have the same configuration options for the B23 when we get up and going with it here in the next couple months.
Hey, thanks, Ted. Not sure if you can hear me. I might have got booted out.
No, yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question, Scott. I totally forgot to mention the utility bed, so thanks for bringing that up. All right, so I think we covered the big tire kit sufficiently. If there's any questions about that, let us know. But it's pretty fun going, 9 to 10 miles an hour on a Model B. You can really cover some ground. Oh, and I will mention too with the big tire kit. Right now, the only tire option we have for that is a turf tire. We are in the process of getting molds made to add an all-terrain tire in that 20-inch size. One of the downsides of a 20-inch tire is that there's a lot fewer options for it. If you go looking in the aftermarket, it's just not as common of a tire size. So because of that, we've decided to work with Hoosier, who's making our turf tires these days, to tool up an AT tire that looks very similar to our non-directional AT tire that we've had for years and years for the in our 18-inch size, the 1811 AT tire. So it'll be a tread pattern that you recognize, but in this big tire kit size. All right, let's move on to Model B add-ons. We've never had the ability to put an implement hitch on a Model B, but with the chassis changes that we made to the B27i, we decided it was time to add this capability, this compatibility. And so we've went to work, started about a year ago on an implement hitch project. You can see it looks similar to the implement hitches that we've had available for our collection machines for a long time. But there are some slight differences. The way it attaches to the tractor is similar in that it's still using the deck arms, but you can kind of see in the picture there's a strut that locates the hitch up and down, more similar to how we do it on a Model H. So on our collection machines, there's an extension and a big bolt that sticks out the back of the hitch that contacts a cross member on the chassis that locates where that hitch ends up being vertically. We wanted to do it differently on this, and we had to shorten that because the Model B chassis is just different than our collection machines. And so it made sense to add these two struts on the side. It really makes it doesn't make installation simpler necessarily, but it makes that initial setup a lot simpler. You're not having to kind of get back under the machine and adjust a bolt and a jam nut. So it goes on very, very quickly and simply. Operationally and compatibility wise with implements, it's basically the same as the implement hitch that we have for our collection machines currently. Another thing we wanted to have available was the soft cab for the Model B. So you can't do a soft cab without an implement hitch because the soft cab uses the hitch to mount the front of the cab. But with the addition of the hitch, then it was a fairly simple matter of building the attachment brackets for the cab. So you can kind of see the rear attachment bracket on that right-hand picture there at the rear bottom corner of the cab. And actually, Scott, you can see the cab, or the machine that has the cab on it, has the utility bed on a B27i there. So sorry, you can't see the front of it, but you can see the very back of how the utility bed looks on the new Model B. So for for snow removal work, this is a fantastic machine. We've had the A32 available for Model Bs, which is a 48-inch dozer blade attachment. It didn't use the implement hitch. It attached straight to the tractor. And so we've known for years that the Model B is a great snow removal machine with the dozer blade on it. Now, for your Canadian winters, you may say, well, Ted, we quickly run out of places to push snow and we need a snow blower. And so that was really one of the main reasons why we wanted to pursue the implement hitch, so that you can put either our 42 or the 50-inch two-stage snowblower on the front of a Model B, and then with the soft cab on there, it's a great snow blowing unit, snow throwing unit. From a counterweight standpoint, the 50-inch snowblower is kind of heavy for the Model B. We do have tailweight kits for the B27i available now, and they're pretty slick. They're different. They're different than tailweight kits that we've had in the past, where you've had individual 50-pound plates that you have to kind of manhandle onto the machine. For the B27 and the B23, we've made multiple smaller plates. So the base weight plate kit is 3 plates. They're about 16 pounds a piece, so you end up with close to 50 pounds with the complete kit on there. But the first plate is actually an adapter plate that bolts to the rear axle of the Model B. That adapter plate has bolts that stick out the back, and depending on how many plates you're going to add, you use different lengths of bolts there. So rather than trying to add 50-pound plates, now we're bolting on an adapter plate and then adding or sliding on 15 or 16-pound plates, which makes the whole weight addition much simpler. So we have a base weight plate kit, and then there's add-on kits. So the base kit has an adapter plate and 2 weight plates. The add-on kits have 3 weight plates and longer bolts. So if you want to run 50 pounds, just buy the base kit. If you want to run 100 pounds of tail weight, which you would need to do, 100 pounds is pretty appropriate for the 42-inch two-stage snowblower. You would buy the base kit and then an add-on kit. So, but I've probably made that sound way more complicated than it is. Putting these weights on and off is really fast and simple and easy, because you're never trying to lift up 50 pounds and then get bolts lined up. So, yeah.
So we're nearing the end.
Yeah.
We've got about 6 minutes left. So just if anybody does have any questions, it'll be in the next few minutes if you want to get them in.
Yeah. And I don't have a hard stop here. I don't know if you do from a booth standpoint, Noah. So we're getting close though, I think.
Yeah, like if we roll over time, it's not going to stop.
Okay.
Stop our tracks or anything.
So yeah, so first time we've ever had this much Model B implement compatibility, or really any implement compatibility for the Model B. But hitch, soft cab, tail weights, now the capability to run two-stage snowblowers, rotary brooms, all of those things will be nice if you're taking advantage of the year-round capability of the Model B, which is pretty special. So, any questions on Model B add-ons? All right, let's go to the last thing, which is maybe the biggest thing, but not something we can have a ton to talk about today. But if you watched Walker Live, we kind of teased this new model. It was mowing back and forth in the background. It was a little speck, so you couldn't really tell what was going on. But we're really excited to be releasing in the next year the C23i. And this is really kind of the next generation of the Walker grass collection system, and what we think will someday become the flagship model in our lineup. It's got a pretty tall mountain to climb to eclipse the Model T, but we think that this machine has potential to really become the backbone of our lineup in the future. This machine is kind of an amalgamation of a lot of different models over the last 5 years. There's design elements from the Model R, from the new model B27i, along with a lot of influence from the Model S that we introduced in 2012. So this has the 3-shaft blower design that you could see right now in our lineup in the S14 and the S18, but scaled up to really be able to run larger decks. This machine goes faster, it weighs less, it's simpler, it's going to be less expensive, relative to current collection machines. At least probably not less expensive than a Model S, but less expensive than the current Model C. It's going to be a C23i, but there's no reason why we can't scale that up in power over time. We're going to offer this with either the 7-bushel or the 10-bushel catcher box. Speed-wise, it's the same as the current Model B. It uses the same transmissions that we use in the B27i. So looking at, a grass collection machine with the ability to mow at a little over 8 miles per hour with 48 and 52-inch 50 collection decks, also, side discharge and mulch decks, but this is a collection machine at its heart. So really taking everything we've learned from 40 years of making collection lawnmowers and applying that to the last 5 to 10 years of development of new models, combining them all together and coming up with a really special model that's, like I said, really we believe the future of walker manufacturing. So that's kind of, I guess, a big overview. I don't want to get too deep into the details yet, but we plan this summer will be major testing phase for a small fleet of these. We're going to be making not a huge number, but we'll get them out to strategic operators that can run them hard this summer. And then we hope to be in full production with this model this fall, like October-ish timeframe. So it's kind of a big deal. This has been our biggest project over the last 12 months and will continue to be as we build out the capability and compatibility for this new family of machines. Any questions on the Model C? One other thing that I want to talk about briefly is the Eaton Model 7 transmission. If you watched Walker Live, we released a new oil recommendation for that transmission. I just wanted to reiterate that here and highlight it, encourage all of you to start running the new Mobil SHC 630 oil. We're seeing really nice improvements in the heat capability of that oil. You guys running machines in Canada may not see the super high ambience that maybe we see in Phoenix or the southern United States. But this Mobil oil is really good stuff, and it's providing a lot of protection for the transmission. In conjunction with that, we're also recommending regular oil change intervals on the Eaton Model 7, which we've gone back and forth over the years. We've had a few different recommendations, but our recommendation going forward is to change your transmission fluid yearly or every 500 hours. And we would recommend using the new Mobil oil. The new Mobil oil is an ISO 220 weight oil. It's pretty thick. And that increased viscosity is what's giving us more protection for the transmission's internal components when it's running hotter. Another way to keep your transmission cool is to make sure that the cooling fins stay clean and that the cooling fan is in good condition. It's possible if a stick or something else gets jammed up in there, you could break fans off or break blades off of the cooling fans. When we start losing blades, the fan performance drops, and we see lots of fans where all 8 blades are missing. So obviously that's not ideal. So we've been doing a lot of work on the Eaton Model 7. We have some more stuff that we'll be releasing later this year, but in what we've learned, if you keep these machines cool and you keep the oil in good condition and clean, they'll run for a really, really long time. So as the machines have gotten heavier and faster over the years, we're asking more out of the transmissions, and that really comes back to the heat aspect. If we can keep the transmissions cool, they're up to the task of that increased amount of work that we're asking from them. And so keeping them clean, keeping the fans in good shape will help them run cool. And then the other piece of that then is keeping good, clean, high quality oil in the unit as well. So yeah, with the work on the new Model C and that focus, we've still been putting a lot of time and effort into our current Model C and Model T machines. Those machines have a lot of life left in them, and still there's nothing that handles like the Eden Model 7 transmission in one of our Model C or Model T. I love the B, I love the new Model C, but just from a pure handling standpoint, the Eden unit is very special. So we're going to keep it around for a long time and keep making it better, more reliable. So good. Well, that's all I have. It's 10 o'clock. I'm happy to stick around and chat for a little bit longer if you have questions. But
yeah, I'll hop in just quickly. Yeah, if you don't mind a couple more minutes, I know I see Scott's got his hand up, and I have one question that came in. So if you can field
okay,
more questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so go ahead, Scott. Oh, you're muted still.
Wanted to comment that Bruce and I did a bit of Bruce Tallman and I.
Oh boy,
Walker did a bit of traveling around the countryside.
Yeah.
What Ted is talking about here with heat in the transmissions it is a big deal even here in Canada.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to I've got an MT26i. I never was much for paying attention to that sticker on the reservoir that said "Don't open this." And mine were changed regularly, and I got to tell you, I've got one transmission in that machine that's gonna this season will go over 5,500 hours.
Wow.
So I mean, if you keep them clean, keep good oil in them, they'll do the work.
Yep. And what we've had some issues recently with, well, not recently, but in the last few years, it seems like we've had more input shaft leak issues. And really what we're finding is that what's causing those input shafts to leak is actually contaminated oil. And so when you have wear metals, abrasive carbides that have, worn off of the cast iron rotors inside the unit, all those suspended wear metals are little abrasives between the seal lip and the input shaft. And given enough time, that's going to cause a leak. It causes a groove to be worn in the input shaft, and also wears the seal lip itself. And actually, the abrasives get embedded into the rubber of the seal lip, and that's what's causing the input shaft grooving that we see. So by keeping the oil clean, it drastically reduces the amount of input shaft leakage that we're going to see as well. So it all kind of keeps coming back to clean, cool oil. I mean, that's the secret. So.
Nice, thanks for that. And then we have one question that came in through the chat. So we've got one of our local landscapers, Garden Holistics. They were wondering about tweels for the walker. They're just wondering if that's something you guys are looking into, or if at some point they're going to be available.
Yeah, tweels are interesting. I know, there's a lot of interest in them. There's a number of OEMs that are offering tweel options. I like tweels, just to be perfectly blunt. I think they offer some really nice advantages. Obviously, the ability or the fact that they can't go flat is their biggest advantage. But there's other non-pneumatic options out there, but they ride terrible. And so the tweel combines a no flat, basically maintenance free option with something that still rides really nicely and actually maybe rides smoother than a pneumatic tire, because it has quite a bit of a natural damping built into those tension webs which form the spokes on the wheel. So we've run some here. Our problem with the Tweel, and the thing that makes it a little bit difficult in our application, is that their 18-inch diameter, what they would say their 18-inch diameter wheel option, actually measures basically 19 inches and just physically doesn't fit on our A-line machine, or what I call our A-line machines, our collection machines. So our model C, T, and D, the wheel will rub on the back of the deck because of our close deck coupling. We don't have a ton of room between the drive tire and the back of the deck. And so the Tweel, the 18-inch Tweel, diameter-wise, just doesn't fit correctly on our collection machines. With that said, they do fit on a Model B, and the 18-inch Tweel is something we've run quite a bit this last summer on the Model B. It fits actually pretty good with our extended big tire kit axles, or the caster forks. So it's something we're looking at, potentially doing a version of the big tire kit that would include the 18-inch Tweel instead of the 20-inch pneumatic tire. It's something that seems like it has some possibility. The other thing with the Tweel is that you're kind of limited by the load capacities that they've engineered into the wheel itself. So they, and really what that influences is the effective ride height or the effective radius of the wheel. Typically, our machines weigh less than a mid-mount that a Tweel might have originally been designed for. And so they end up riding effectively taller and stiffer than they intended for them to be. That's not true across the board, but the lack of the ability to kind of tailor air pressure for the weight and conditions is something that you lose with the Tweel. With the Tweel, from a ride height standpoint, you basically get what you get and have to compensate in other ways. So if your ride height is not exactly what you need to level the deck, you may be adding washers under deck pins or compensating for that in other ways. So it's hard for us to buy a particular model of Tweel and put it on a bunch of different machines that weigh different amounts, because we start chasing effective ride height. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good to hear. It's nice that it's you're obviously testing.
So we're aware of them. We have experience with them. We like them, but it's something that's hard to just say, here's this tire, it'll fit all of our stuff. Because physically it won't. The other downside is they're fairly pricey. So you have to weigh the economics. They need to last for quite a while to really make economic sense. So anyway.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it looks like I see Scott has his hand up. He might have a question or a comment.
Yeah, I just won't shut up.
I won't either. So.
I think too that maybe anybody that hasn't looked into Tweels, it's not like there's a million different variations in size either that they produce, right? Am I right? Like they have their their size range. But the one thing that I was wondering about, just maybe to address this end user's interest, is there a Tweel in the small size that would work for, say, like the tail wheel on an MT? Because I know that we never really got to no flats back there, but
yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question, Scott. I don't know. I can't sit here and say that I'm aware of every size option they have for the Tweel. We do have some 13-inch diameter Tweels, which would be a common size for a front caster on a mid mount. It's also what we use. It's the diameter that we use on Model T, Model C tail wheels, and also Model H tail wheels. What I was saying earlier about load capacity is really even a bigger issue when it comes to the tail wheels on our machines and our decks. The problem is that, I understand it. When Michelin engineered their 13-inch wheels, they were really going after front casters on mid mounts. Front casters on mid mounts have a lot of weight on them, and so when we put those on the back of a Model H, they're extremely stiff and rough running. They basically, wheels are designed to deflect some. They're designed to have kind of a flat contact patch. And when we run those 13-inch wheels on the tail of like a Model H, we basically get no deflection, and they don't run well back there. They would be more appropriate for the back of like a diesel powered Model H, where there's just more weight back there. There could be some applicability for like a Model C because it's the right width. It's like a 13650, I think is what they call it. So it'd be similar to what we would run on the back of a Model C. It could work there. I don't think they do anything narrower than that 6.5-inch width that we could put like on our dual tail wheel, like you would see on a Model T. You could swap a Model C fork onto a Model T if you really wanted to run that wheel on the back of a Model T, but with the heavier 10 bushel catcher box, with all that weight concentrated onto the single tail wheel, then you get into just some ground compaction issues potentially, and also turning friction. That's why we went from the single to the dual tail wheel on the Model T, just to reduce the turning friction.
Acts like a differential almost back there.
Yeah. It gives you 2 points that can rotate independently of each other. So
that's good, Ted. Makes perfect.
Yeah, we'll keep, as far as wheels go, I think we're not giving up on them. And like I mentioned earlier, we could actually have something available from the factory, especially related to the Model B for, with a wheel option. So
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, and I think as far as I can see in the chat and everything, I don't see any other questions. So yeah, if you're wanting to wrap up, we won't hold you any longer.
So, well, no, this has been great. I appreciate you all being here, asking some good questions, and it's kind of weird to think about cutting grass right now. There's snow on the ground here. I'm sure there's snow on the ground there, but yeah, before we know it, it's going to start warming up. So, and then as far as, I think tomorrow at the same time, I think Ryan Walker, my brother, the president of our company, is going to be on. So if you're interested in hearing more about Walker Manufacturing as a company, I think he's going to talk about a little bit about our history and what's going on now, and also where we're headed into the future. Ryan and the sales guys and the marketing guys are doing an awesome job, really charting a path into the next couple of years. Have a bunch of great things in store. So I think tomorrow's going to be really interesting as well. So I'd encourage you to come back again, maybe 3 days in a row. So.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm seeing some people. I see Ryan Boyd saying thanks in the chat, and yeah, I think thanks from everyone. It was nice to get that overview of kind of the things that are currently available and soon to be available, and kind of the future of where things are heading. So it's nice.
Yeah, it's been I think a pretty productive year on the development side of things here, and we'll have some a lot more exciting things to share too in the next few months. So keep pushing forward. So, yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Yeah, this is really nice. Yeah, again, it's too bad we couldn't all be in person at the landscape show, but it's nice to get some people and get people out of town. We see Brandon from out east, Brandon Cox there, one of our healers, and yeah, this was awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna end the meeting now, but thanks again, and yeah, we'll see y'all soon.
Yeah, thanks guys. Have a great day.